Welcome to the Think Factory podcast. We got one question for you. What keeps you up at night?
Welcome to the Think Factory podcast. This is Anthony Davis, one of the founders and hosts of the podcast. And today I'm happy to welcome Andrew Lynch, the president and co-founder of Zipline Logistics, to the show. Andrew, happy to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm super happy to be here.
Yeah, and why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your company, so we give the listeners an idea of your background.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So I'm 44 years old. I don't know what generation that makes me, but I fell luckily enough fell completely backwards out of college into a career in third-party logistics. I started my career at the largest non-asset-based transportation provider in the world, a large publicly traded business called C.H. Robinson Worldwide, where my role there was essentially going out and finding trucks to move freight, building relationships with trucking companies, and sort of leveraging those relationships into pricing opportunities. And it was a great time. I fell backwards into it, sort of in that, hey, I just need a job out of college to get me to Chicago and figure it out from there. And I absolutely adored it. I loved the company I worked for. I met wonderful people. I met my wife. I made lifelong friends, and I learned an enormous amount about a business that I didn't even know existed until I graduated from college. So
I think that's one of the great lessons in working, right? You friends, long-term relationships, as you said, right? It's like the thing you don't see coming when you start your work path, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I've had a few dozen of those among friends of like, oh, wow, that's what you're up to. I get it. I get why that's necessary. And for me, I think it was harder for me to explain to my friends what I was up to than most of my other friends, found. I think, when you're an accountant. But when you're trying to explain that you talk to truck drivers and CEOs and company owners and, appointment desks all day, and mostly in a combative way, to make a living, that's pretty heady. And about 6 years into that time, the thing that stood out to me the most, and what turned out would stand out to my co-founders, was that, the world of third-party logistics as it stood then, and really largely as it stands now, was this world of very generalized businesses. If you go on to any third-party logistics company's website, it's like, we can move anything, anywhere, for anyone, on any truck of any kind, at any time. It's like, all right, and that's great, right? That's an incredible capacity. But I've always likened it to going to like the Cheesecake Factory, right? The menu's like 60 pages long, and they make, spaghetti carbonara, and they make fajitas. And it's like, well, what, which one of these things are you doing well, right? And
right.
I think, not to cheap shot my competitors, but I think to some extent, like, the answer is none of them, right? We're doing them all kind of in a mediocre way, or in a way that addresses the largest possible market we can address, which is its own strategy. And at the time, what we also, or at least I took note of on the side of the business that moved the actual freight with trucking companies, was that anytime I had a shipment going to Walmart, and at the time Walmart was really the only sort of 800-pound gorilla that had these programs in place that we'll get into later that are in place today, these sort of compliance programs. But I'd book a Walmart shipment on my truck. I'd get the cheapest rate I could get. I'd make as much money as I could, right, in the transaction. And then I'd get a phone call from the sales rep, and the sales rep would be like, hey, that load's going to Walmart, and it's got to be there at 5 a.m. tomorrow. And if it's not, like, there's hell to pay. We get a big, we get a fine. We get a do better letter, and just make it happen. And it's like kind of the cake's baked at this point, right? I don't know if this driver's going to make it or not at 5 a.m. Quite honestly, I booked this thing out of sort of greed and my own, kind of personal economic motivations. The driver's got his or her own motivations, right? And so does the carrier. And, at that point, it was sort of too late to really solve whatever problem was going to be caused. And that always stood out to us as sort of backwards. And so, in 2007, at the ripe old age of 26, decided to go out on our own and start our own business. And the concept then is the same as the concept now. It's obviously iterated a few hundred times towards the niche. But it was, hey, let's just take that model, that traditional third-party logistics, non-asset-based, freight brokerage model, and just refactor it through the lens of serving consumer brands that have to comply with retailer demands and that have, maybe a different set of values.
Yeah. I think that's a fascinating area. I know from my own experience, like with clients selling into those big consumer retailers, like just getting the order, that is the start of that process, right? They got this great product. They finally get it made, contract packaging, however, or they do it themselves. And getting that first order is just the start of it. But really understanding that how it all plays out. And that's what I'm, really want to hear about with you today is like sort of that inside information, like being a little bit early, no good, being late, terrible, right? Like having, like, it's great you're in with the big box, but you better be ready and prepared to go with the rules, right? So maybe you can, it's fascinating you guys focused on the consumer packaged goods or CPG, right? That's and it's such a vast area too.
Yeah, and you're hitting on like really sort of the thing that probably confuses people the most about us from a market position standpoint, including folks that we bring in, and then really the core function of what we do. So we market ourselves as a CPG logistics provider, right? What our expertise really is in, besides just logistics, the execution of moving freight from A to B, is retail compliance, right? So because that's what builds the guardrails, that's what builds the the KPIs that we're measuring our success against, is how well are we performing into these retail SLAs or these retail service level agreements. And yeah, what's important for brands to understand is, as you said, you get an order from Costco, that's a huge win for your sales team and for your brand, but it's a huge problem for your operations team, right? And someone's got to solve that problem. Not only how does it need to be packaged, how does it need to be configured on the pallet in order for Costco to accept it? Costco kind of uniquely takes a lot of product right off the truck on the pallet and puts it right onto the floor. So they're extremely strict about certain things that other retailers just aren't, because it's not functioning the same way, right?
Yeah.
And then on top of that, when does it have to be in this Costco distribution center? What day does it have to be there in order to be on the shelf, right? And then that's just your fill rate order. Once you start churning, hopefully you get some product turn, right? And you get to capture long-term shelf space with that retailer. Well, now you've got to understand, hey, they've got a due date at their distribution center every Thursday. Well, if it has to be there every Thursday, then you should assume that by Monday of the following week, there's going to be shelf space gaps if your product wasn't there on Thursday. And so what are the penalties for failure, not just from a fee and fine and sort of structural standpoint in your contract, but also, and really most importantly, what is this costing me in lost sales when I don't have product on the shelf, but my competitor who's in the same section of the grocery store does? And those are really, the economic sort of weights that we want people to place when they're making a decision on who to partner with when it comes to transportation services.
Yeah, and I think that's fascinating. Part of what you're doing is like, like you said, getting stuff from A to B. That we can do that, but when you're uniquely selling, CPG into retail, like the metrics of that, right? So, and you're right. Every when the big box retailers are doing their planograms a year ahead of time, right? You get on the planogram, but you're right. If you're in the big stores, they've got every customer's got 5 options on that shelf in health and beauty to get whatever that vitamin is or that product. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that, like how what you guys bring to a customer, watching those metrics and helping them maximize profit.
Yeah, absolutely. So we focus really all of our energy, and we try to direct all of our stakeholders and our customers' energy towards compliance to a lot of different. There's a lot of different terms for this, but we call it must arrive by date. What
is it called?
Must arrive by date is how we've heard. Required arrival date or required destination date, or required delivery date. There's a lot of different sort of acronyms for that term, but at the end of the day, these retailers, they have a program in place that is meant to drive their suppliers to meet very, very specific deadlines so that they can have full shelves. And I think there is always an enormous amount of conflict in this between retailers and suppliers. Suppliers like, it's a big, cash grab. And, they feel how they feel. That's an understanding feeling. It can feel like that for sure. But the reality is retailers want the same thing the brands want. That retailers want exciting products that draw foot traffic into their stores so that they can churn out all sorts of products. And your product is exciting enough that they want it on their shelves. But what they absolutely don't want is for someone to be standing in their store looking at an empty shelf of an exciting product they were there to buy, and then pop open Amazon Prime and order it to their home to be delivered, which is what happens like 80% of the time when there's an out of stock. They don't come back later to Kroger to see if that product's there yet. They just order it from somebody that they know has it. And so, the impetus behind this isn't greed necessarily. It's about being able to run a sustainable retail location, right? And so, we measure that performance. We don't just measure on-time delivery to our trucks because, you could have a product due, tomorrow at a distribution center. If the appointment I get is for Friday, for whatever reason, whether it's because they didn't have appointments that day or I had to, move something around because the product wasn't ready on time, whatever that reason is, doesn't matter. If you weren't there on Thursday, you were there on Friday instead. I was on time to my appointment, so I'm 100% on time. You were late, right? And what we want our customers to understand is that that's extremely common. A lot of folks, and this, I live in the sales process in our company, and a lot of brands, almost all brands that we meet when we first meet them are like, oh no, we're 96, 97% on time, we're good. But if you go to like the Food Marketing Institute's research on this stuff, what retailers are reporting is that their suppliers are like 70% on time, right? And so like if the macro number is 70%, it statistically can't possibly be that everybody I meet is at 98% on time. And what we end up finding is, we ask them to do a deeper dive or to connect directly with their retailer, and that they will come back and say, hey, you know what? I didn't realize all these fees and fines I've been getting from United Natural Foods or from KeHE are actually associated with me being 60% on time to my must arrive by date. And I got to figure out a way to fix this, right? Because there's an enormous amount of margin being sucked out in those fees and fines. And then again, what they're also not, necessarily tying the line to is I've got a budgeted revenue number every quarter that's based on sales that I made in a contract. Why is the actual revenue number, significantly smaller every single month or every single quarter? And that gap is usually represented by out of stocks. It's product that you made, bought all the raws for, you made it, you warehoused it, you might have even shipped it, just didn't get it done on time, and that cost you, kind of line for line sales. And so, the difference between, I think the Food Marketing Institute's number was 77% on time for the average brand across every single retail and every single retailer category. The categories have different performances, you can imagine.
Yeah.
But the difference between 98% on time, which is what almost every retailer asks for, and 77% is about $80,000 per million in revenue. So $80,000 in margin is getting sucked out per $1 million in revenue to these retailers when you're not achieving, or when you're, let's just say you're hitting the average. Assume that there's lots of people hitting well below that average.
Yeah.
And so, when you think about a consumer brand that, kind of the baseline margin for a sustainable consumer brand is going to be 35%, like maybe 40. So if you've got $1 million in revenue and you're running a sustainable business with a $350,000 gross margin built into that $1 million in revenue, and then I pull $80,000 of that out because you just didn't, and again, there's no savings on pulling that out. It's just cost. You've got a massive margin hit that really can be the difference between you even having a sustainable business and you not having a sustainable business. But more importantly, it can be the difference between you being able to invest in more salespeople, right? More lines, more, product innovation.
Right.
And so the implications for this are enormous. And that's, when we try to talk to folks about logistics being more than just a cost center, right? That you should look at it as an area of investment, and the return you should expect is 98% on-time delivery and on-market costs, right? You shouldn't have to pay a super premium price, because the art behind this is getting it done sort of economically.
Yeah.
And that's where optimizing your strategy and working day in and day out with a partner that understands these retailers, understands logistics, and knows what levers we can pull in order to get you the absolute best result for the dollars you're spending. And that really is the value.
And what's the range of like what Zipline can provide to a client or customer? Are you providing a big range so that, like, let's say I've got my product and I was like, I don't have a shipping department. I've got this, but I got this great new whatever private label product I'm making, and I've got Walmart just gave me their order for next year. Like, give me an idea of the things that you could, you help clients with.
Yeah, it's, we look at it as sort of 3 levels of engagement, but, we've got sort of dead center, our largest 25 clients are full outsource. We manage every single thing for them. So orders flow into them, whether it's through an ERP or into a van or something like that, right? That's handling their orders for them. They flow straight into our order management system, and our team can optimize everything. Pricing is already, sort of established typically at that point. Optimize everything based on the right mode, the right date, when to ship, in order to execute on the retailer's expectations. Every single retailer in the country we deliver to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times a month. And from there, we execute, appoint and execute all the shipments, find the trucks, track everything, make sure everything, closes out as planned, and then deliver back reporting, visibility, business analytics, and really strategic consulting all through that lens. And those are folks, there's quite a size range, but those are the folks that, as I walk through our client history with people, when we see a brand become a category leader, and a lot of times it's a disruptive category, but you can look at anything from, coconut water to almond flour crackers to, healthy tortilla chips to, functional beverages. The brands that have this mindset of, I've got to have my product on the shelf when my customer is there to buy it. Every single time, everywhere they look to get it, I've got to be there where they expect me to be. Those are the brands that become the category leaders. And you don't have to be Pepsi to be a category leader in beverage. And you can't be Pepsi. You can't act like Pepsi if you want to become a category leader in beverage, right? You've got to operate like a plucky small business that wants their customers' money. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day.
It sounds like with that offering and your focus, that like the rise of private label brands over the past few years, especially with social media, social influencers, to help totally changing the way we consume marketing for consumer packaged goods. Totally. That seems like you've got a sweet spot for that, right? Like that to help. Really help anyone but really help someone who's, I've got this idea, I know how to market it. How do I get it on the shelves, right?
Yeah, and I think the nice thing, or at least the thing that's helpful for a lot of the businesses in the space, is that a lot of the private label goods that are, sitting on your store shelf, whether it's, kind of Good and Gather, whatever store brands, because a lot of that stuff is made by it's made by the same people that are making the branded product. Now, it's not always going to be the same, right, seasoning packet. It's not always going to be the same quality across the board. Like, obviously, They have lots of changes and things.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is typically it is still typically going to be sort of a mid-sized brand or a small brand that's got a product that has private label attraction. I do think that one of the things that I want to make sure I call out is that, private label is very disruptive in sort of like this. I don't know, Staples probably too sort of high up the chain, but they don't tend to be the most innovative products, right? If someone has innovated, launched a set of brands, or a set of brands is launched in a category, and it's built itself up to a place where now a retailer is saying, okay, I need to get an own brand or a store brand, version of this. I think prebiotic sodas are probably a great example of that, right? I mean, you still really don't see store brands doing it yet, but you know it's coming. I mean, that's what's next.
Yeah.
And for those folks, right? I mean, they're under the same compliance rules as branded products, right? They just they usually have a better margin, but they've got to operate under the same set of rules, and so for them it really becomes about guiding them through what each retailer they're targeting is going to expect out of them, helping them understand up front what that cost basis is going to look like, right? We can help folks forecast what their transportation budget's going to be. We can help folks if they're already especially if they're already a partner, choose where to warehouse product, right? Work on geographic location selection, site selection, and help them really understand what their network needs to look like in order to facilitate delivering to these doors, profitably, ideally, especially in today's environment. So, whether it's private label or it's branded, for us, the impetus remains the same, which is we want to get as deep into your business as we possibly can. We want to take as much of this burden off your plate as humanly possible, because we know we're going to execute it through a lens of expertise and a value set that we share.
Yeah. And it would seem to me that just, again, having worked with a lot of companies that make CPGs and sell into retail, I don't think a lot of them appreciate like that part of the winning retail strategy is having a really strong logistics partner, right? They just think, oh, we just got to ship it out. Like it's the last thing they're thinking about, right? But it's a major piece of this, especially for big retail, right?
Absolutely. It a lot of times can be the difference maker, right? I think back to COVID a lot, and this stuff happens, COVID or not, but it was so in our faces during COVID that it was hard for anyone to ignore. I wish that people would sort of not have compartmentalized it, but do you remember how much product replacement was happening in your grocery cart when you would go to the store? Like, well, just because you're not getting a text message or a text isn't being sent about it anymore doesn't mean it's not still happening.
Yeah.
And what was going on all the time was like, I go to the store and I'm going to get a blue Yeti, cup, and I put my order in and I pull up and, they're like, hey, we didn't have Yetis, but we had Stanleys. So we threw a Stanley in there, and you're like, yeah, it's whatever, that's fine. And, that's a one-time thing, and that transaction might hurt a little bit, but Yeti doesn't feel it. What Yeti does feel is that, hey, now I'm walking around with a Stanley, and hey, this Stanley's pretty nice. It's a pretty good mug. It's got a handle. I like that. Whatever. It keeps my drink just as cold as my Yeti did. It's $8 cheaper. I think I'm a Stanley person now, right? And that's a more long-term thing. But for us, it was happening across, sparkling water, right? You get in and you order LaCroix, you show up and they put bubbly in your cart. And you're like, all right. You're never saying no because you just want your orange sparkling water or whatever. But, a week later, you might reflect and be like, God, that bubbly was just as good. And I'm seeing here it's 99 cents instead of, $2.49. I'm going to go with it. And so, those kind of decisions are still being made every single day at the grocery store. I know that I still, if my specific, brand of sparkling water isn't there, I'm just going to grab a different brand that I know is going to be, relatively similar.
That's right.
And so, what retailers are measuring when they're deciding what that planogram looks like next year is product turn, right? Every single square inch of shelf space for a retailer is monetized, and it's, you're paying rent.
Yeah.
And if your product is not turning, they're going to go look for something that's going to turn faster in that spot. And, unfortunately, missing those due dates causes your product to not be on the shelf and therefore not to turn, and somebody else's to turn faster.
Yeah. If you've hit the mark in terms of a product people want, you're doing a great job marketing to create that, like one of my clients always says, it's great to sell it, but if it's not coming off the shelf, you're not doing a good job. So you're doing the good job marketing. You got the orders, people want to buy it. And to your point, but if it's not on the shelf and they just, as soon as they try something else, you may have lost the golden opportunity, right? Like,
absolutely. And, we work with a lot of brands that, like they'll lean on letting the retailer control their transportation because they're like, it's too much. I don't want to do it. And that's a big part for us of like, hey, no, like one, just pick a better partner, right? This doesn't have to be a huge, time sink for you. Pick a partner that you trust and go with them and follow their lead on this thing that you're not an expert at. Like you got into the functional soda space because you're passionate about a product and you're passionate about marketing, right? And you're good at it. You probably didn't get into it so that you could try to figure out, how to get 4 pallets from Dallas, Texas to Columbus, Ohio for under $500, by Monday at 5 a.m. It's like, just let us do that. And in the end, what you'll find is that you've got the opportunity to take control of something that is absolutely critical to your brand's success, both economically and, sort of customer experience perspectives, without taking on a massive burden. It just requires you to, again, identify a partner that you trust, get some transparency and visibility in your relationship, and prioritize, that part of your business.
Well, I think that's great advice to anybody in CPG selling to retail, right? Like that, if the message here, and I'm hearing it loud and clear, is like have a great logistics partner. And I know like kind of where you started the conversation was you get into logistics, you don't realize like what it's all about, right? It's like so complicated and so many moving pieces. And I think that's like so many things. I was just thinking about a client the other day that makes extruders for food, to make like, Cliff bars and stuff. And you think, oh, that's no big deal. And he was telling me that like everybody that wants to buy it, they want to come and test it. So they have this huge testing facility that now not just selling and knowing everything about extruders for food, but setting it up and showing the client it will work. And now they're like food scientists, right?
Yeah.
And it's like like what you just said, you probably know more about, functional products and the latest, the category leaders, and looking at Nielsen reports on who's selling what's right, like scan numbers at every retailer. You like, and you do logistics. Right?
My friends are always like a mix of like amazed and sort of grossed out by the level of awareness I have of consumer products. Like anytime someone mentions a thing, I'm like, oh no, there is a thing for that. And then it's just because I guess you do become a little obsessed with the market that you serve. I'm probably naturally a pretty good consumer, and so I'm sure it lends itself in that way. But you go to enough of these trade shows and you spend enough time, walking your grocery aisles. I won't give up the grocery shopping in my house. I love it. Partly because I get to see, what's popping up on the shelves, what's different this week, and who's got a new SKU or a new flavor.
Right. Right. Like I find that fascinating when if you've got the home run products, all of a sudden the number of SKUs grows, right? All of a sudden they're like, and we have it now in this color and that flavor. And it's like,
well, and then you watch them make a mistake. And what's funny from my seat is like, then you watch a brand that and like make a mistake that you've seen another brand make, right? Like, I'll use RX Bar. I don't know if you got to bleep that out or not, but like, they made these killer bars. They blew up. They had this monster, brand recognition, and they were like, all right, like we're gonna make like muffin cups that you can heat in the microwave and eat, and it's like, well, and those aren't going to be made. Those aren't made in the same place as you make the egg white bars, like. Right, I know that this is a whole new supply chain you've added in order to try to extend this brand, and you probably reached in the wrong direction, right? But I see those, I'll see a brand make one of these sort of attempts to grow in a way that isn't necessarily in line with maybe their value set or what it was that we bought, and it's just one of those things that you sort of see the same mistakes happen over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And it boils down, I think, sometimes to like, you've got to know what your value is, what your value set is, why people are buying you. And then you really got to live that forever. And that goes for me too. I think whenever I talk to anybody about starting a business or building a business, it's like, listen, you don't have to innovate anything. You just have to, like, innovation is in and of itself can just be a value set. But like, you don't have to invent something. just serve a demographic of values that is currently underserved, and you've got yourself a niche, and you can go, build that out as large as that value set will take you.
Right. No, I think that's, I think that is really well said, because like, I had an experience a couple of years ago talking about mid-market, right? We were at some conference, someone's talking about mid-market, and it was one of the big insurance brokers talking about it. And I thought, this company is so big, they must have 80% of the market, and they're massive, national insurance brokerage company. And it was a leadership conference. We were there, this guy was talking about leadership, and he was saying, what percentage of the mid-market do you think we have in the US? And everyone's like, 80%, 70%. We said 5%. And it just he had a smile, kind of like, this is how big the mid-market is. There's so much business in this country that can be done, right? And so, like what we were talking about earlier, before we went on the podcast, about how vast, like the CPG, the consumer packaged goods. And you're right, like if I go to a shop right near my home here in New Jersey, or the giant Wegmans down the street here from my office, I sometimes just stand at the top of the cereal aisle, and it's how many different kinds of cereal there are, and that stuff comes off the shelf, right? It's like, it's moving.
It's flying. You could get there, and Honey Nut Cheerios is out of stock. It's a mind blower.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's fun. My industry's the same. The largest player in my space, which and this is a stat from 06, I think I remember it being. They were the largest by far. It was like Robinson and a bunch of also-rans that were under $1 billion, and we were like a $10 billion global market cap. And they had, I think, 3% of domestic market share, and it was just like, wow. And it goes to the fragmentation of trucking and kind of what brought me into this space in the first place. But it truly is incredible, the scale of consumption that this nation can produce.
Yeah. Well, I think on that note, listen, I really want to thank you for coming on the podcast. We appreciate it. I appreciate your time and your thoughts, and sort of sharing this inside information about your industry, and really, anyone that's looking to sell into retail or is selling in through retail, CPG especially, like, they really should be listening to the message and calling you for sure, or calling someone at Zipline if their numbers are low, right? Like, get the numbers up, make more money.
Absolutely. There's more ways to improve your margin than cutting costs. I know, I really appreciate it. This was great. I had a lot of fun, and I hope it proves valuable for a listener or two. And I'm thankful for being invited.
You got it. All right. With that, I'm going to sign off, and hope to speak to you soon.